We're shipping you off to Sunset Manor tomorrow. You're dead weight now, Olivia. Let me tell you something about those words. They would come back to haunt Crystal Morrison in ways she never imagined. Because what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that this frail old woman they were discarding had secrets. Dangerous secrets. The kind that could destroy everything they built on lies and stolen money. By the time Crystal realized her mistake, it would be too late. The woman she'd called dead weight was about to become her worst nightmare. My name is Olivia Frank, and this is the story of how I got the last laugh. But before we go any further, I'd like to ask you a favor. Please hit that like and subscribe button and click the bell to be notified of our upcoming videos. It helps us more than you know. Thanks a bunch. Picture this. Rain hammering against the windows of a cramped attic room while I folded my worn cardigan into the battered leather suitcase that had belonged to my mother. At 73, my fingers moved with practiced efficiency. You learn to pack quickly when you've been unwanted long enough, though my heart felt like it might shatter with each item I placed inside. Those words were still echoing in my mind, sharp as broken glass. We're shipping you off to Sunset Manor tomorrow. You're dead weight now, Olivia. Let me paint you a picture of Crystal Morrison, my daughter-in-law. Imagine a woman who had perfected cruelty the way others perfect art. She'd been arranging white orchids in the foyer when she delivered my death sentence. And yes, that's exactly what it was. Her manicured fingers moved with surgical precision, each flower placed with the same cold calculation she applied to destroying people's lives. No discussion, no consultation, just a decision delivered like she was discussing the weather. And my son Miguel? He stood there like a statue carved from disappointment, scrolling through emails as if his mother's entire future wasn't being decided right in front of him. This was the same boy who used to bring me dandelions and tell me I was his best friend. When I looked at him pleadingly, searching for any trace of that loving child, he simply shrugged. It's probably for the best, Mom. You'll have activities there. People your own age. People my own age. As if I were some expired product that needed to be sorted before disposal. Let me tell you who I really was before I became the invisible woman in the spare room. For 42 years, I was a high school English teacher at Roosevelt High in downtown Bellingham. I was the teacher who arrived at 6:30 a.m. to tutor struggling readers, who stayed late to direct school plays, who spent my own money on books for students whose families couldn't afford them. My classroom was a sanctuary where Shakespeare lived alongside contemporary poets, where every child learned that their voice mattered. I shaped young minds. I inspired countless students to love literature. I was voted Teacher of the Year 3 times, awards that were now gathering dust in a box in that attic room. When my husband Robert died in a car accident and Miguel was only 8, I worked double shifts tutoring wealthy kids in the West Hills just to keep us afloat. Picture those exhausting years, grading papers until midnight, then waking at 5 a.m. to prepare lessons, surviving on coffee and sheer determination. Every sacrifice was for Miguel. Every late night, every weekend spent chaperoning school events instead of dating the kind principal who kept asking me out. Every penny saved for his college fund instead of the European vacation I dreamed of taking. When Miguel graduated law school summa cum laude and married Crystal, I thought I'd won the lottery. Finally, my son would have the family I'd always wanted him to have. Crystal seemed perfect, beautiful, educated, from a prominent Bellingham family. When they asked me to sell my cozy bungalow in Southeast Bellingham, the house where I'd raised Miguel and created a lifetime of memories, I didn't hesitate. We're family, Miguel had said, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. We'll all live together. It'll be perfect. Perfect. God, what a joke that word became. The first year was tolerable, even pleasant at times. I cooked elaborate meals that filled the house with warmth, my famous pot roast, homemade bread that made the kitchen smell like heaven, chocolate chip cookies that disappeared as fast as I could bake them. I cleaned with the thoroughness of someone who took pride in creating a beautiful home, and I helped with the twins, Emma and Ethan, when they were toddlers. Those children were the light of my life during those early years. Emma with her wild curls and infectious giggle, Ethan with his serious brown eyes and endless questions about everything. They adored my stories, my homemade cookies, my patient attention when they scraped their knees or had nightmares. I taught them to read using the same gentle methods I'd perfected with thousands of students, helped them plant a garden where they could watch tomatoes grow from tiny seeds, showed them how to appreciate the small wonders of the world. For a brief, shining moment, I believed I'd found my place in this new family structure. I felt useful, needed, alive in a way I hadn't since Robert died. The changes started small, almost imperceptible. Dinner invitations became adults only affairs. Crystal would entertain her friends, wives of judges, partners from prestigious law firms, socialites with hyphenated names, and trust funds, in the formal dining room with its crystal chandelier and imported china, while I ate alone in the kitchen with a paper plate and plastic utensils, listening to laughter that never included me, conversations about vacations to Tuscany and children at Swiss boarding schools. It's nothing personal, Olivia, Crystal would say with that patronizing smile. It's just that our friends are more comfortable with people from similar backgrounds. You understand? I understood perfectly. I was an embarrassment, a reminder of Miguel's humble origins that didn't fit Crystal's carefully constructed narrative of their perfect life. My belongings started disappearing during Crystal's frequent redecorating phases, each one more expensive and elaborate than the last. First, my favorite armchair, the one Robert had bought me for our 10th anniversary, where I'd rocked Miguel to sleep as a baby, vanished overnight. It clashed with the new color scheme, Crystal explained with a shrug. I donated it to Goodwill. You should be happy it's helping someone who really needs it. Then my collection of first edition books disappeared. Volumes I'd collected over decades, some signed by the authors themselves, worth thousands of dollars. They looked so old and dusty, Crystal said when I asked about them. I had them removed. This is a modern home, not a library. Finally, even my photographs of Robert were banished from the common areas. Pictures of our wedding day, our honeymoon in San Francisco, Miguel's first steps, family Christmases, all relegated to my tiny room or thrown away entirely. They made the mantle look cluttered, Crystal explained. We need clean lines, sophisticated aesthetics. The twins were gradually coached to call me Olivia instead of Grandma because Crystal thought it sounded more sophisticated and less aging for her carefully cultivated image. I watched helplessly as the children I'd helped raise became polite strangers, taught to see me as an embarrassing relic rather than the woman who had sung them lullabies and bandaged their scraped knees. The final humiliation came that New Year's Eve. Crystal was hosting her annual soiree for Bellingham's legal elite, judges, partners, city council members, anyone who could advance Miguel's career or her social standing. I was given a sandwich on a paper plate and told to make myself scarce upstairs while caterers transformed the main floor. Through thin walls, I could hear champagne glasses clinking, sophisticated laughter echoing through the house I'd helped buy but was no longer welcome to enjoy. But here's what Crystal and Miguel didn't know, and this is where their arrogance and greed would finally catch up with them. My parents, immigrants from France who built a successful chain of bakeries throughout Washington, had been far more financially savvy than anyone realized. Hidden in a safety deposit box downtown was the deed to a lakeside cabin in Spokane, Washington, along with a trust fund worth nearly $200,000 that I'd never touched. My mother had insisted I keep it secret. Pour less urgences, she'd whispered on her deathbed. Never let anyone know you have something they cannot take. People become different when they know you have money. I'd also been quietly setting aside money for my pension for years. Small amounts that Miguel and Crystal never noticed because they'd never bothered asking about my finances. Combined with the trust fund, I had enough to disappear completely and start over. So I packed methodically. My mother's pearl earrings, my father's watch, the quilt my grandmother had sewn by hand, photographs of Robert and young Miguel, my teaching awards, and books that had survived Crystal's purges. I left behind the expensive clothes Crystal had bought me, the jewelry that never felt like mine, the life that had slowly suffocated my spirit. I left a note on the pillow. Since I'm dead weight, I've removed myself from your burden. Don't look for me. Consider this my final gift to your happiness. The Greyhound station downtown was nearly empty at 11:30 p.m. on New Year's Eve. I sat on a hard plastic chair, watching the digital clock count down to midnight. I should have felt devastated, but instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: freedom. Excuse me, are you all right? I looked up to see a young woman in scrubs, probably coming off a hospital shift. She had kind eyes and a gentle smile that reminded me of my former students. I'm fine, dear, I replied automatically. You don't look fine. I'm Sarah. Mind if I sit? Something about her genuine concern broke through my defenses. Before I knew it, I was telling this stranger everything. About Miguel, about Crystal, about being treated like unwanted furniture in my own family. Sarah listened intently, occasionally squeezing my hand. When I finished, she pulled out her phone. I need to make a call, she said. There's someone who's been looking for you for a very long time. 20 minutes later, a tall man in an expensive coat walked through the station doors. He had silver hair and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. When he saw me, his face lit up with recognition. Mrs. Frank, he said softly. It's really you. I stared at him, confused. I'm sorry, do we know each other? You probably don't remember me. I'm David Long. You taught me senior English at Roosevelt High in 1987. The memory came flooding back like a dam bursting. David Long, quiet, brilliant, from a struggling Irish immigrant family. His father had been laid off from the shipyard after 20 years of loyal service, and David had been working nights at a convenience store to help pay rent, his grades slipping despite his obvious intelligence. I remembered how he'd fallen asleep in class, how his essays had been brilliant but increasingly late, how I'd seen the exhaustion and desperation in his 17-year-old eyes. He'd been one of my special projects, one of the students I'd refused to give up on no matter how hopeless things seemed. I'd done what I always did for students in need, what had made me legendary among Roosevelt High's faculty. I'd found him a better-paying tutoring job with a wealthy family in the West Hills, using my connections and reputation to vouch for him. I'd bought him a winter coat when I noticed him shivering in the hallways, claiming it was a donation from another family. I'd written recommendation letters that captured not just his academic potential, but his character, his resilience, his determination to rise above circumstances that would have crushed a lesser spirit. Those letters had helped him get a full scholarship to Stanford. Small acts of kindness that I'd never thought about again. Just part of being the teacher I'd always believed I was meant to be. You changed my life, David said, his voice thick with emotion. I became a federal prosecutor because of you. I've been trying to find you for years to thank you. Sarah stepped forward. David is my husband. When I saw you crying here tonight and heard your story, I knew I had to call him. David knelt beside my chair. Mrs. Frank, what your son and daughter-in-law did to you tonight isn't just cruel, it's illegal. Elder abuse, financial exploitation, emotional manipulation. I've prosecuted cases exactly like this. I shook my head. I don't want to cause trouble. They caused the trouble, David said firmly. Let me help you the way you once helped me. 3 months later, I was standing in the kitchen of my lakeside cabin in Spokane, watching the sunrise paint the Cascade Mountains in shades of gold and pink. The cabin had been renovated with my trust fund money, new appliances, fresh paint, a deck overlooking the lake. For the first time in years, I woke up each morning knowing I was exactly where I belonged. David had been true to his word. His investigation into Miguel and Crystal's finances revealed a pattern of elder financial abuse that went far beyond my situation. They'd been systematically draining my pension, using my Social Security for luxury purchases, and had even taken out a second mortgage on the house using my name without my knowledge. The legal reckoning was swift and merciless. My doorbell rang one morning, interrupting my coffee. I opened it to find Miguel standing on my porch, looking haggard and defeated. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his usually perfect hair disheveled. Hello, Miguel, I said calmly. Mom, we need to talk. I led him to the living room, but didn't offer him coffee. We sat in silence for a long moment. Crystal left me, he finally said. Took the boys and moved to Seattle. The house is in foreclosure. The law firm fired me when the ethics investigation started. I felt a flicker of sympathy, but pushed it down. I'm sorry to hear that. The federal prosecutor, David Long, He's destroyed everything. My career, my marriage, my reputation. All because you couldn't just accept that we were trying to help you. My sympathy evaporated. Help me? You stole from me, Miguel. You let your wife humiliate me. You were going to warehouse me in a nursing home without my consent. We were trying to do what was best. For who? My voice rose. For me? Or for Crystal's social climbing? When was the last time you asked me what I wanted? When was the last time you treated me like a human being instead of an inconvenience? Miguel's face crumpled. I know I messed up, but did you have to destroy my entire life? I'm your son. I stood up, my back straight, my voice steady. You destroyed your own life the moment you chose to steal from your mother. David Long didn't create evidence. He simply exposed what you'd already done. So what now? You're just going to let me lose everything? You already lost everything that mattered, I said quietly. You lost your integrity. You lost your family's respect. You lost your mother's trust. The money and the house were just things. After Miguel left, I walked out onto my deck and breathed in the crisp mountain air. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. David's case against Crystal and Miguel resulted in full restitution, plus damages. The judge called it one of the most egregious cases of elder abuse he'd ever seen. Justice served. I smiled, remembering something I used to tell my students. The best revenge isn't getting even, it's living well. I got my money back, plus interest and damages. More importantly, I got my dignity back. The federal case made headlines in Bellingham, exposing the ugly reality of elder abuse in affluent families. Crystal's social circle turned their backs on her. Miguel's law firm not only fired him, but reported him to the State Bar Association. But the sweetest revenge of all was simply this: I was happy. I started volunteering at the Spokane Public Library, teaching literacy classes to adults. I joined a hiking group for seniors and made genuine friends for the first time in years. I even started dating a retired professor named William, who brought me flowers and actually listened when I spoke. My phone rang. It was David. Mrs. Frank, I have news. Crystal was arrested in Seattle yesterday for attempting to defraud her new boyfriend's elderly mother. Apparently, she tried to pull the same scheme she used on you. I wasn't surprised. Predators rarely change their patterns. There's something else, David continued. The state is using your case as the foundation for new elder protection laws. They're calling it the Frank Act. Your courage to speak up is going to protect thousands of other seniors. That evening, as I sat by my fireplace reading a novel I'd been meaning to get to for years, I reflected on life's strange turns. 6 months ago, I'd been a forgotten woman in an attic room, counting down to what felt like the end of my story. Now, I was the protagonist of my own life again. The doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw a delivery truck. The driver handed me a large box with no return address. Inside, I found a beautiful orchid arrangement, white orchids, just like the ones Crystal had been arranging the night she'd announced my exile. The card read, "Some flowers bloom more beautifully after surviving the harshest winters. Thank you for teaching us that strength isn't about enduring abuse. It's about having the courage to walk away from it. With love and admiration, your students at Roosevelt High." I placed the orchids on my mantle and smiled. Crystal had used white orchids as symbols of her cold perfection, but my students had transformed them into symbols of resilience and rebirth. As midnight approached on the anniversary of my escape, I raised a glass of wine to toast the woman I'd become. I'd learned that sometimes the greatest act of love isn't staying, it's leaving. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't destruction, it's reconstruction. And sometimes the people who try to bury you don't realize they're actually planting seeds. I bloomed again, more beautiful than ever, in soil of my own choosing. And that, my friends, was the sweetest revenge of all. So let me ask you this. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Would you have stayed quiet, or would you have chosen yourself? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what part of this story stayed with you. Because sometimes the most important lesson isn't about getting revenge. It's about remembering that you're worth fighting for. Here's a video I suggest you watch next.